The changes to the One D&D Cleric have been surprisingly controversial, and the reason for it, to me at least, is something I didn't expect. The One D&D Cleric represents a significant departure from its 2014 predecessor. Its subclass has been pushed back, Channel Divinity has received some tweaking and is available earlier, features have been changed, new features have been added, and spellcasting has also received a change in a way that I don't particularly like, but I don't want to beat a dead horse about it either. Suffice it to say that I am not a fan of available spell slots determining which spells must be prepared. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, check out my video on the One D&D Bard, I'll leave a link in the description. However, of all the changes made to the class, the one drawing by far the most attention is the new version of Channel Divinity, and particularly Divine Spark. This has been called by many the new ultimate first level dip, a name I'm not sure is accurate or honestly even matters for reasons I'll delve into shortly. Before we can get into the discussion about Divine Spark, it's important that we set the groundwork for the new Channel Divinity. Channel Divinity is now available from first level rather than second, and is usable an amount of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. While I'm not nearly as enthusiastic about this change as I was in my original video, I still think that it's a good move. Now, by just 4th level, a cleric can use their Channel Divinity 3 times per long rest, whereas it previously would take until 6th level just to be able to use it twice per short rest. And while the old version does technically still offer a higher ceiling for the amount of uses, it is contingent on your party taking short rests, something that I have seen that many groups don't actually incorporate all that often into their games, as it is largely dependent on the type of campaign that is being played. The availability of Channel Divinity at first level is something that has caught the attention of many, as it allows access to a potentially very strong feature with just a single level investment into Cleric, and one that will continue to scale upward and improve regardless of whether or not you continue to invest any more levels into the class. The potential issue of multi-class dips is something that Jeremy Crawford did touch on in his discussion with Todd Kenrick shortly after the Cleric and Revised Species Unearthed Arcana was published. He noted that there were 2 main reasons the Cleric subclass, and all subclasses for that matter, were moved to 3rd level. The first being to be easier on new players. Asking new players to comb through that much information, particularly for the Cleric which has so many subclasses, and to make such an important decision right off the bat just felt like a lot. But secondly, it was to discourage a single level dip into Cleric to obtain some highly valuable features from a subclass. While this was the stated goal of these changes, many are arguing that it has not had the desired effect, as they feel that the new Divine Spark Channel Divinity is more than powerful enough to justify a single level dip, and that is problematic for the design of the game. The new Channel Divinity feature, Divine Spark, allows a cleric to use their action to select a creature within 30 feet of them that they can see, roll the number of d8s equal to their proficiency bonus, and then do one of 2 things. They can either heal the target for an amount of hit points equal to the number rolled, or they can cause the target to make a Constitution saving throw, taking force damage equal to the number rolled, or half as much on a successful save. Interestingly, the side of this which seems to be drawing the most attention from the community, and to Chris of the Treant Monks Temple YouTube channel who posted a video all about it, is the healing aspect of the feature. I will leave a link to his video in the description, however, the crux of his complaint is that the Dungeons & Dragons team failed to discourage single level dips into Cleric, as the healing potential and the perpetual scaling for such a small investment is just too good to pass up. And I'm really not so sure about that. He does go on to make some reasonable suggestions, but I will discuss that a little bit later. In his video, Chris provides us with a great table detailing the way the healing through Divine Spark scales at each proficiency bonus breakpoint. The numbers presented on this table is the average healing provided across all available uses. 2 uses at 1st level, 3 uses at 5th level, etc. So we can see that, on average, across both uses between 1st and 4th level, a cleric using Divine Spark would heal 18 hit points per long rest, averaging down to 9 hit points per use. The obvious question then becomes, is this actually any good, and is it worth it? From my perspective, the answer is no. Before I get too into the nitty-gritty, I will emphasize that I understand that the perceived problem is more about the ease of access with the 1-level dip and the free automatic scaling based on proficiency bonus rather than the healing itself, but I feel it's important to lay the foundation first before I discuss that. In his video, Chris really emphasizes the 162 hit points in average healing that becomes available at 17th level. And why not? It's a huge, flashy number. But it's really not all that impressive at that high of a level, especially when you consider that the hit point maximums at that point can fairly easily be over 200, depending on the class. and the fact that it's really only averaging 27 hit points of healing per use, which renders it functionally useless in combat at that level, as it consumes your entire action and is almost certainly not going to be out-healing any damage being taken in 17th to 20th level encounters. In nearly every circumstance during combat, you would just be better off killing the thing rather than incrementally healing your party. Which also leads me to my next point. 162 points of healing is flashy and impressive, particularly when dealt entirely to one single target in one turn. However, averaging that out over a standard 4-person party is really only about 40 points of healing each, and it takes 6 turns to accomplish this. Obviously, yes, outside of combat it does have a little bit more utility, but the numbers just really aren't there. The more you dive into it, the less impressive it gets. And none of this even considers the fact that this requires a 17th to 20th level character to execute. I would be genuinely shocked if even 1% of D&D campaigns were played at that level. I saw a comment on Reddit recently that pretty perfectly encapsulates my thoughts on this matter. It said, "Stop trying to build 20th level PCs, that would be awesome playing level 5 adventures." Even in the scenario where we take a step back and apply its usage at 5th level, providing an average healing across all 3 uses of 41 hit points, it just doesn't feel that amazing. A fighter at 5th level starting with max hit points at 1st level and then using average HP thereafter with a conservative constitution modifier of +2 will have 42 hit points. Divine Spark, on average, can't even fully heal that one character. Never mind if the healing is being doled out across the whole party. With all that said, what do I think of the new feature? I think it's really good. I think it's quite clear that the feature is a really good one, but where I see myself differing from many is that I do not believe that it is so good that it warrants warping the game or the class around. Chris does go on in his video to make some suggestions that, while I think are very reasonable, run directly counter to one of the design goals that he is so keen to understand, and ironically, one that he even mentioned mere moments earlier. One of the suggestions he makes towards the end of the video is to increase the uses of Channel Divinity at specific class level breakpoints that coincide with when the proficiency bonus would increase, and to tie the amount of d8s rolled for Divine Spark to the number of uses. This has the effect of not altering the feature's usability for someone who goes straight cleric, but prevents the automatic scaling for someone taking a single level in the class. A reasonable balance. Except, Chris has spoken at length in multiple videos about wanting to know and understanding the design goals for One D&D, and here is an instance where we actually know exactly what the design goal is. Proficiency bonus uses per long rest is a mechanic that was brought to the forefront in 2020 with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Jeremy Crawford has explained the logic behind this, and Chris even discusses it in his own video. It's used because the team wanted to make more use of the things that already exist on the character sheet to both help new players and keep the game running smoothly. Things that we know and are familiar with already and won't require someone to have to look something up that should be simple and straightforward. We use our proficiency bonus so much. It's a very familiar aspect of our characters. As a result, this mechanic struck a great balance of ingenuity and simplicity. However, if we use the ideas proposed, we immediately run counter to the stated design goal. Using the suggestion presented previously necessitates the inclusion of a table. Whether that table is very easy to understand or not is not relevant. It still has to be there. Some of the other suggestions presented are to simply stop the feature from scaling, which really only serves to punish the cleric player, or to tie the d8s to character level and uses to proficiency bonus or also character level, which would actually allow for substantially more healing provided the player keeps taking levels in cleric. I don't know whether or not that's a good or bad thing though, it's just worth mentioning. This whole discussion has brought up some things which, honestly, probably deserve a video on its own, but I'll do my best to get some coherent thoughts out on it. So much of the discussion online about this topic, as can be seen from Chris's video, is centered around the idea of balance, optimization, and how problematic one-level dips are. I have some controversial thoughts on this topic. While I don't really mean to be ripping on Chris's video all that much, he does mention a few things that I have come across repeatedly online, and that I think are fundamentally flawed arguments and start the discussion off from the wrong perspective. Near the beginning of the video, he mentions that by not taking optimal multiclassing options, you are being mechanically punished and that those dips are must-haves. This is, at its core, untrue. Though the difference might be nuanced, there is a very distinct difference between being punished and not being rewarded for something. Firstly, the reward is only a reward if it's something that you actually wanted to accomplish. if your goal is optimization or building the best character possible or being able to have a bunch of free healing, then yes, this is a great reward for you. But if those aren't things you care about, then it's not really a reward at all. For me, taking one level or even multi-level dips into classes for the sole purpose of acquiring power is intrusive and not fun. I know that there are plenty of people who do enjoy that kind of thing, and there is absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Even in a small poll of this channel, 20% of respondents said that power and optimization was their primary focus. Secondly, it's not a punishment, as nothing is being actively taken away from you. You're not losing anything, you're just not gaining that specific thing. The reason this is an important distinction is that it often goes overlooked that you're still gaining other things as you progress down whatever path you were going to take. You're just not necessarily getting that extra few percent bump in power, but again, that might not matter to you. These are important things to mention, as without keeping them in mind, the discussion doesn't begin from a place of good faith. It begins with an assumption that something is objectively broken from all perspectives, which is simply not the case. When I take a step back and try to evaluate what is happening here, it seems clear to me that the issue isn't necessarily with the feature itself, or even with multiclassing, but rather with table philosophy. Something that seems to go overlooked in many discussions about balance in D&D is that this is not an extremely competitive online game. Dungeons & Dragons is a cooperative game where a group of people gather around a table or online, have some drinks and snacks, and have fun together. While it is certainly important that there is relative balance between the classes and subclasses so players don't feel like their contributions are irrelevant, it's probably more important to ensure that there's a wide variety of options available to be chosen, even if some of those do provide slight increases in power over another. To emphasize, balance is important, just probably not in the traditional sense. Power is also relative to everything around it and is easy to scale. While many are concerned about how strong things might seem right now or why this might be the ultimate one-level dip, we still have 8 classes and 44 subclasses that we know nothing about in the context of 1D&D, so comparing them to their 5e counterparts to gauge power is not a worthwhile endeavor. While Jeremy Crawford did mention that one of the reasons for moving subclasses back to 3rd level was to potentially discourage players from making one-level dips, it's important to note that it was to discourage, not to stop outright. Some players find optimization compelling and others do not. While this cleric one-level dip might be optimal, particularly from a free healing perspective, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. And while this whole discussion does potentially speak to the potential problem of infinitely scaling first level features, we'll have to wait and see on that. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing to remember is that everyone in your group should be on the same page about their expectations for the game and their characters. This is precisely what a Session 0 is for. If the be-all end-all for your character is sheer optimization and power, but the rest of your group isn't so keen, that table probably just isn't right for you, and everyone will likely be better off ensuring that they are all in agreement about what they want from the game and what they find fun. I know at my table, while I don't find optimization compelling, if one of my players did, I certainly wouldn't go out of my way to stop them unless it was negatively impacting the experience of my other players. I think the same philosophy can be applied to the game as a whole. It's important to not have completely insanely broken options, particularly at first level, but just because there might be a few mildly compelling subclass options does not mean that we should shape the game around the possibility that someone may or may not take advantage of it and may or may not ruin the game for others. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and checking out some of my other 1D&D content. It's all linked on screen right now. Thanks.